that's really it. Unless there's something that you guys would particularly like to address in the video. If you've got a particular hot take that you would like to be brought into. Anything? No? I mean, that bird noise was perfectly timed. That is a sarcastic bird tweet in the background. Really knocked my confidence. I'm a man who's surrounded by seagulls. The last thing I needed was a sarcastic bird. Hello and welcome back, and that is right, you clicked on the link, you know the title, you saw the thumbnail. This is about Synology to Enterprise, and today I've got myself and 3 other prominent members of the YouTube and indeed Synology community out there to discuss Synology right now. What we think of where they're going, do we think they're going to Enterprise, do we understand what they're thinking, and more. And that's the purpose of today's video. And in today's video, and you can hear that bird song in the background, not a seagull, for those of you that are going to put that in the comments, we have got Will from SpaceTrex. I pointed in the right direction. You guys know who he is. Again, director of Yabra Technologies, a guy that got into YouTube and it got out of hand. Next, beneath me, on my screen at least, we have got Luca from Black Void, a prominent voice, I would say, in the Synology support community and reviews, and of course, in the background of Syno Forum. And on top of that, of course, a Synology official partner, unless he's going to correct me. And there at the bottom right of my screen, we of course got Frank from WonderTech. Phenomenal number of tutorials and support available from him. And between us, we're hoping to crack this nut that is Synology to Enterprise. So, do you know what? I'm not going to say much about what I think. I think Synology are getting a little bit too enterprise. I do think that I like the GS series. I quite like the DP series. I like what they're doing with Synology's surveillance station series. But I do think there is definitely a contingent of users getting overlooked. So straight away, I'm going to throw it over to Will. Will, just get straight to the meat and bones of the matter. Synology, do you think they're getting too enterprise right now or not?
I definitely think it's, and really, I think it comes down to a lot of that stuff. I've been seeing a lot of their presentations. Seems like they're presentations for shareholders rather than actual customers a lot of time. Especially all the stuff at, what was Computex? Just very much, oh, look at this. This is where we're going the direction of. From the clustering side is something I'm interested to see. I've seen a lot of companies try really hard to cluster and then end up failing out in some way or another. And if they can do it and do it well and make it really easy to cluster, I think there's huge value in that. But at the same time, I'm worried that there's a lot of calories that are going to be spent on those processes that would be diverted from honestly building what has them a really stable customer bases, being able to do a lot of things for no subscription fee and having actually pretty decent performance with it.
Great answer. And you know what? Now we're going to throw over to Luca, who, again, you're much closer to Synology than I am. So right now, let's put you on the spot a little bit. Synology, how do you feel about their stance right now and their position as the company and the solutions that are outputting?
Well, I mean, you've seen it firsthand, considering you were at Computex, and I would definitely have to agree with Will and say that it might actually look like they're moving away from enthusiast and heavily into enterprise. But if you want to do something well in enterprise, you really have to throw it all in. I definitely agree again with Will, and I do hope they will not forget their huge customer base that they actually built a reputation on. Whether or not they're going to completely kill that mid-tier, that enterprise, that enthusiast level is yet to be seen. But I don't know. I mean, just my personal opinion is, yeah, maybe they'll make it happen, maybe they won't, but I guess we'll see. I'm not really sure that you can go enterprise and do it easy, like Will suggested, but I guess we'll see. Not really sure.
And how about you, Frank? Rather than ask you the same question again, when you saw them unveil the Data Protect series there with Active Protect, and you saw the GS series, what was your initial reaction to that when you saw them unveiling that kind of larger scale dedicated solution there for the enterprise?
So it's interesting because Synology really, I feel like, built their name. This is just my opinion, but I feel like they built their name with home users. And DSM is obviously used in the enterprise space. So you can look at it 2 ways. You can say DSM is an enterprise operating system that home users have available to them, which is a great thing. But what was interesting with the Active Protect series is that breaking into the enterprise space is a lot more difficult than releasing a new product and hoping it catches on with home users, because you're really looking for enterprises, potentially companies of 10,000 plus employees, to compare your new Active Protect hardware and software versus staples in the industry for years. And I know I saw something, they said it was like a 90% cost savings or something that they had over their competitors in terms of that. And just my opinion, from an IT corporate perspective, I feel like that is irrelevant in the sense of this is a company's entire data, their enterprise data. They need something that's rock solid. And until it's proven to be rock solid, it's going to be difficult to break into that space. So I almost felt like I actually liked what I saw. I thought that the Active Protect, entire suite could be at someday a very powerful alternative for a lot of these companies out there. But it's an interesting approach that's kind of started from the baseline, way back of DSM, and now moving into a totally new space where you're going up against other enterprise giants, and can you compete with them?
Yeah, and I feel like it really kind of came from that like active backup for business, just ultra scaled, right? Like I think they've honestly because so my business is like small businesses who do not have a massive IT budget who want good protection, and that's where like I deploy active backup for business all the time. People are like, this is license free, and it really in that like 50 or sub 50 person company ranges, it is awesome, and I would love to see it scale. There's every once in a while there's a few bugs where backups don't happen because X, Y, and Z happen in the drive, and so I think that would have to really get cleared out and automatically fixed to really scale it out. But I would love to see like them take that and be able to morph it with really just like a clustered backend, have it work with 50,000 devices hitting it or however many they're going to scale to. I would love to see that because it's really in a lot of ways the same software on the end user's client, like Active Backup for Business for Windows or Mac. They hopefully can just maintain those two versions for both the enterprise and the home user or the small business. Though I do wonder if they will start saying, oh, hey, you want more features? Go up to the full Protect line.
Yeah, I think.
Go for it, Luca. Go for it, man. You got this.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think that's actually what's going to happen. I think that this was a long time coming to basically have APM, to something that's going to be a subscription based. It's not going to be free anymore. It's going to be on a dedicated appliance, right? Their hard drives and whatnot. But I believe that Active Backup for Business on DSM will eventually suffer this new rollout of data protection. And they might actually maintain it, but not in terms of new features. So new features will probably just shift over to APM. So
my major concern with it, very much along those lines, is, I mean, we talk about the term grandfathering with a lot of software being told, right, these users are fine. And we saw arguably some grandfathering in certain applications of a much, much lower caliber in DSM 6.2 into 7. We saw certain features suddenly get popped along the side. And I think you're right. I think what we're going to see is ABS no longer getting feature updates, security and stability updates. And then maybe DSM 7.3, DSM 8, suddenly it won't be in there. I wouldn't be surprised if Active Protect, the appliance, becomes the status quo. And one of the things, because again, I maintain what I said at the beginning, Active Protect and the DP series, I like them. I don't like really that they're only based in RackMount. I like, again, me and Luca talked about this already previously. There was lots of indications that there was desktop models which have either been completely retired or been pushed down into the roadmap. And those for the little SMB user in the middle made a lot more sense. But what I didn't like was the talk of the subscription model after year one, which again, I understand at the enterprise level at that scale, that makes a great deal of sense. And in many regards, to piggyback on what Will said there, ABS was insane value to have this appliance. It was much like Surveillance Station. It was worth the price of admission. But there's going to be those users who are going to be forced via security updates and the rest of DSM to potentially lose out on that platform. And it's how well they maintain those two things. I mean, I know this is a slight divergence, but Will, handing back over to you, if Active Backup Suite was retired in some formal way, and we're not talking 1-2 years, if it was retired, do you think a lot of your user base, your new installations or existing customer base would steer away from Synology in that scenario, or do you think they would jump on to the AP software platform?
I mean, so honestly, when I'm deploying stuff, like one of my big selling points is no monthly reoccurring subscriptions. It's kind of what I try to do, and people like that. People like buying a product that does a thing, and you pay for the product, and then in 5 years when you need a new product, you buy that, and that's easy. And honestly, that's really nice. What I like about Synology, pretty much everything other than Surveillance Station and Mail Plus have that fact. Like, to do everything on there, it is no monthly subscription fee, and it is really nice. And I think that is why they have been able to, I don't know if disrupt is the right term, but break into a very enterprise space. And honestly, for those of you who know Unify is kind of doing the same thing, where Cisco literally is selling switches that after a year, if you don't have a license, the switch stops switching. Like,
Yeah.
That's where you can come in as a smaller company and add in those features and not have those monthly subscription fees and steal a lot of people over. I think I would have trouble selling
Yeah.
Synology as is has it with C2 Cloud and C2 Protect, and I've never really set up because to me it doesn't make any sense. Just buy the NAS and deploy it. I tend to stay away from subscription fees if at all possible, just because they lock you in and it just adds up. So I don't know. It'd be tough, especially for the people who are buying it for the sole reason of backing stuff up. At that point, they'd have to compete with Backblaze, which is just ubiquitous and everybody can set it up for $7 a month. I guess 8 now.
But for you, Frank, just handing back over to you for a sec. When you're making recommendations, when people are asking you for your advice or they followed one of your guides and they're like, do you know what, this works? Have you found any pushback to look at this? Take another case, an example of Synology changing their stance on quite a critical part of the system deployment. And I definitely saw a change in attitude towards Synology for this, compatibility. And compatibility, seemingly, Synology are really keeping a hard line on this. Have you noticed, Frank, a big difference in your engagement with potential customers or just recommendations after this hard change on compatibility? And have you stopped recommending certain Synology products based on that?
So this is just my opinion, but I feel like Synology does a pretty good job of tailoring to home users and tailoring to enterprise users, and not the best of job of tailoring to small businesses. Because I feel like as a small business, you have to either pick the home line, so you have to go with a Plus model, potentially rack mount, and then Active Protect, which I think is going to be completely enterprise. And in that middle area, it's kind of blurred a little bit. And it's not to say that they don't do well in it. I think they do very well in it. It's just that their product line, you're kind of stuck. Like if you're a small business of 5 people and you need an 8-bay NAS, are you going to go with an 1821 Plus? Or are you going to go with an 1823 XS Plus and have to, potentially fulfill all those hard drive requirements, the Synology hard drive requirements and stuff like that. So in terms of the actual Active Protect suite, we'll call it, I think that's totally enterprise. It'll never fall down to small businesses and lower. I just personally can't see it. The whole presentation to me screamed enterprise. They had 2,500 backup devices that could be clustered together and one management interface and all this cool stuff. But that doesn't apply to small businesses. So I just don't see that line personally falling down into the small business / home user category. And I think to an extent, I personally think that the Active Backup Suite will stay inside of DSM, but I think it'll be more for testing for those enterprise users, like under the hood, kind of like how the B Station is a bunch of Synology applications under the hood that are packed into one little, easy to use tool. How they took some of those DSM applications, I think it's potentially the same way on the other side, that they're going to use those test scenarios with home users to enhance the actual backup. So hopefully that answered your question, but it's an interesting approach, I think.
So what you just said, I would actually love to happen. To me, that is the best case in the world, where they never come out with the tiny version that's desktop unit. They only ever sell rack mount units with a minimum of 500 or 50 devices. Who knows? And then you just keep that as such a separate product here, where you don't try to start. Oh, well, if we cut this out of DSM, we're going to be able to push people up. Because in reality, I mean, 50 devices in active backup for business is probably starting to push it for most even larger XS NAS units. And I feel like that'd be an ideal situation, is they can continue to prove themselves at the active backup for business DSM level. That is the small business level. You can buy it, set up, run it, and then you use that proof with that basically same software stack, just clustered out to work with multiple machines. And now you can say, hey, look, it works great here, but now this works with 50,000 devices across 50 different NASs, however they end up doing it. And then they've got incentive to maintain both. To me, that would be the absolute perfect situation. And you basically get home users with enterprise grade applications to be testing users.
I mean, again, I agree with mostly everything you said, but the only thing I'm doubtful of is that Synology will look at the popularity of active backup and then think users won't. I mean, if for a user to go for that DP system, you have to be quite large scale. We said about the multi-site deployment, number of users and such. I hope this isn't the case, but for what you just described to happen, I wouldn't be surprised if Synology deviate active backup into a two-door model. An active backup could go down that road. I can't imagine a scenario where active backup remains free in the format that it is in 5 years' time. I think they will look at the funding for that product. I can imagine what they'll do is introduce either, I don't think they'll go licensing, because I think licensing will be too unpopular. But I think what they'll do is they'll create a two-door policy, a three-door policy, much like they do with a two licenses rule on surveillance station. But again, all hypothetical. Luca, did you have another point to make there? Sorry, I was going to ask you another question, but far away.
Yeah, sure. But I do agree with what was obviously already said. And I just wanted to mention that we have to take into consideration that Synology might actually scale down. So APM, DP models might go to desktop versions as well. So if you can imagine a 4-bay or a 2-bay unit, right, similar to what we currently have, top of the line plus models, 923 or 723. So why I'm mentioning this is because if we look Synology globally, you're obviously all living in countries that are have a lot of customers compared to Croatia, where I come from. So just as an example, a large company in Croatia is north of 500 employees. That's already considered very large, right? As opposed to, I don't know, some company in the States. So I think that 2-bay, 4-bay, 8-bay versions of APM could be quite appealing for particular markets. And that basically correlates with what Will said. It's going to be a bit tricky to separate those two elements. But again, data protection appliances are actually simply backup appliances. You can't do nothing else with them, right? So they do have a market for that. And because of that, I think that everything that's actually running DSM is not going anywhere. It's not threatened. B-Station is a proof of that, because nothing actually happened with the J series, value series of desktop units. So I don't think that APM as a platform will do anything major to current DSM models, so to speak. But I think the biggest threat is subscription, and on the other end, what's going to happen feature-wise on the DSM side regarding active backup. Again,
I think
Can you
with the
guys?
subscription. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to ask, can you guys see a scenario where they, similar to the hard drive requirements in enterprise devices, where, you don't have to, but they strongly suggest you use Synology branded hard drives. Do you see them in rack mounted devices potentially taking out the active backup from only those devices and saying you have to buy active protect? I don't know. I'm throwing out a scenario,
Yeah,
keeping it for home users, or is it going down a different path?
I think
You
they'd
first,
love to
Will.
do that, but I think that there's sometimes that you run into things where product trees have to be like cohesive and make sense. And
Mm,
that's one of those things that I feel like, while as much as Synology would love to make that happen, I feel like there's no way they could possibly do it and have it make any sense. And that keeps it in there. And so that's actually kind of where I feel like if they start selling those desktop active or APM units that are 4 bay for 20 devices, 10 devices, that's where I think the writing on the wall ends up coming into DSM and saying, oh, well, now you've got two things that are competing. One of them makes you a one-time purchase fee.
mm,
One of them makes you a monthly recurring subscription fee. We all know how that's going to work. So I think if they start adding in those desktop units, that's where I'm going to get worried and say, the writing's probably on the wall. I
mm.
think as long as they've got rack mount units where their minimums are in the hundreds, or then I feel like there's no real competition there, because fundamentally the enterprise is just a different beast when it comes to spending money. Like
Well,
spending a few dollars a month on everybody's computer, enterprises don't bat at that because their IT costs will go down. It's just one of those
mm.
things that you can make a ton of money off that. So I think if they start kind of keeping that stuff up higher is personally where I'd like to keep it.
Well, do you know what? Just following what you were going to say there, one, I agree with you about the whole rack mount stuff there at early doors. I think more likely we would see Synology reduce their desktop models to a more refined portfolio there, rather than having four, maybe even five 4-bay models. They'll go down to two, value, standard. And I think that's where the B Station will step in. But to go to the point about desktop DP series, I mean, again, I think I've talked about this in another video. Where we were talking about model IDs that surfaced online, there were numerous desktop model IDs under the DP moniker that we found. So either they explored it and decided not to, or that is something that they are working on. We saw model IDs appearing for a 2-bay, a 4-bay, a 6-bay, even a flash model as well. Now, again, these are model IDs. They could represent nothing, but these were found in numerous locations. So I wouldn't totally discount the idea of a desktop model. I mean, I think we've really delved into this subject. I'll move on to another one in a sec. But again, I'll leave a link in the description to some of the resources myself and Eddie found that did point towards desktop models in this series that were either supposed to be a phase one or have been moved to a phase two, or that whole thing has been abandoned. But we'll have to go into that.
And also, just to finish up on Frank's question, we have to understand another thing, that APM devices are not pushing HAT 5300 drives. They're pushing 33 or 3310 device hard drives, right? So those are also not enterprise grade, which could end up on this side of the fence. What Robbie said, we could eventually see desktop models with HAT 3310 models, 720 RPMs, 7200 RPMs. So yeah, we'll see.
I think, well, definitely, they're all going to arrive pre-populated. Realistically, much like the B Station, this is going to be firmware locked to a drive capacity, locked to. I mean, it's a 10-minute deployment. That even the RAID synchronization there in the background is either going to be hard baked into it, or it's going to be the first thing it does. But anyway, moving forward. So real quick, while we're talking about Synology and potentially being a bit too enterprise for some, or what they are doing with the middle tier, let's go for a hypothetical. Okay, so starting with you, Frank, this time, real quick. If Synology did start stepping away from, let's call it the enthusiast, the prosumer tier, who would fill that void? Because there's a lot of players, but I would argue none of them provide the same caliber of product. But who do we think would try to fill that tier or be the closest to fill it?
That's a tough one. I think that, if you just look at the landscape right now, probably QNAP would kind of be in the lead, and that's potentially just from name alone. I mean, as far as I can remember, the two main players were always Synology and QNAP, and now there are a bunch of other players that have kind of come to the table. So probably QNAP, but you know, people have their problems with Ugreen, but Ugreen's making a huge push towards home users right now. Don't appear to be really trying to appease enterprise at all. Potentially not even small business. So maybe Ugreen, but like I said, people have their concerns with Ugreen. So I'd probably say QNAP if I had to, or maybe Asus Store. That's I haven't ever used them. I'm purely going based on some of the videos I've watched that you guys have created. But maybe some of those names that have been around for a little longer than the ones that have recently come out.
I do think QNAP has not really pulled their finger out in terms of filling the void that Synology has arguably left. I mean, let's be realistic. When Deadbolt happened, that happened at a time when Synology had first really unveiled a lot of their slightly more hard-nosed and hard-stance compatibility, and that would have been a great opportunity for the likes of QNAP to kind of expand within that space, at least as far as they're concerned. And Deadbolt happened, which kind of exposed them for not really handling that side of things very well. But over to you, Will. Do you have any inkling who you think would fill that space?
I mean, if we're talking, so I would almost separate out realistically the home labber and the home user space. The home labber space it's such a hard audience, and this is coming from somebody who started off this channel from like having a server rack in his living room. So it's absolutely where I'm at, but you can't capture it because nothing you ever produce will have the right specs for every single person. I think the home user space. I mean that's a really hard thing to track down, and you're absolutely right. There's a zillion companies vying for that space right now, and I don't think any of them have nailed it yet. I think that probably poised to really nail it would be the big three. I think Ugreen's doing a push, and you never know if they can keep that momentum. They can keep it. You got QNAP, who's historically got a ton there, and then you got Asus Store that's like never felt like it really hit the hit the ground running. And I think honestly a lot of Home Lab is going to be on the TrueNAS side just because you can do whatever you want on there and just build it yourself and then just build VMs, which ends up being kind of the next iteration of almost any software solution you go with. If you want true, I can do whatever I want with my hardware.
How about you, Luca? Inklings?
Well, it's difficult to go after Frank and Will, considering what they.
Sorry, I've really hospital passed there, didn't I?
No, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, nothing smart will come out of me after what Will and Frank said. I definitely agree with them. But on a more positive note, I don't think Synology is going to let this spectrum go. Yeah. I mean, okay, they've been trying to sell themselves as enterprise, big business, and competing with NetApp, and now with Veeam as a product, as a backup platform and whatnot. So they're obviously testing out. They're obviously locking in. They're basically trying to get more and more of their R&D locked into their products, their hard drives, their appliances, everything, so they can compete with big brands on projects and whatnot. But I don't think they're going to let go what they have achieved for the past 25 years. I mean, I just don't see it. Will there be a change? Obviously, we can definitely see the change, but I don't think people have anything to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, I want to. Can I tack something onto that? I think that honestly, so the largest jobs I've ever done with the biggest companies, about 75% of them have come from the fact that they've got a resident in-house IT firm, and the biggest ones come from the fact that the person who's in charge of IT has a Synology at home to back up their phone and things like that. And I think that they realize that is their major way into the enterprise right now, is gaining trust and gaining ease of use with the people who are into IT, have a pretty highly decent chance of running IT at their company, And I think that's honestly how they're able to gain enough trust, because it's so hard in enterprise to go away from Dell. Why would you, like, there's a saying, nobody's ever been fired for buying a Dell, because it doesn't matter if it costs a lot of money, at least it's going to work. And I think building up that trust, the way they're doing it right now is through that, hey, you're the owner of this business, or you're in charge of IT infrastructure. You already have one at the house. Well, you can now just do it here. You're already familiar with it, and just kind of grow from there. So I do think there is still a valid business case for the smaller units for Synology to keep, even if they're pushing to go into the enterprise.
Yeah, I think it would be a huge mistake if they ever. Sorry, Rami. I think it'd be a huge mistake if they ever tried to limit their, home usage with DSM and everything. DSM, the reality is we're asking this question, but the reason it's so hard to answer it is because DSM is light years ahead of everything else, and it's just the fact, and it's hard to break into it when you're so far behind in that area. So it would almost feel like Synology is giving up on the entire space, as opposed to just keep producing these incremental updates to their hardware and still winning out just because of how far ahead they are in terms of their software.
I mean, this opens the door, really, this middle space. As we've all just discovered there when we're talking about it, there isn't really, for want of a better word, a hardware player that would step in there, which then gives way to the software player, because currently, obviously, the two leading runners when it comes to this space are TrueNAS and Unraid. Unraid, contemporary speaking, is the more user-friendly if you do get over the lack of a hardware wizard for the storage once you get to grips with it. TrueNAS, on the other hand, whether it is even TrueNAS Scale, does have something of a learning curve behind it, and you have to get your own hardware. So there is a technical aspect. And then you've got that splinter, Hex OS, which is still virtually nothing known about it, which is trying to make this big, bold promise of being a user-friendly TrueNAS. So maybe if there was a need to fill this space, which I think we're agreeing if there was, it's not going to be for a long time, it would probably be a software player rather than a hardware player, because the hardware players need to reprioritize, perhaps, there in the background. But focusing about some of the things that they did unveil at that Synology Solutions exhibition, one of the things I would love to talk about, because apparently that's what you talk about on the internet these days, AI. How do we feel about the way Synology have approached AI integration? Because I'll be straight with you, I'm not going to go into detail, because you guys at home already know my opinion. I quite like the way they've integrated AI moving forward into the collaboration suite. But Will, how do you find the way they are going to be moving forward with integration there?
I'll be completely honest with you. I feel like it's just checking a box. I think that, like, it is what it is. I feel like everybody has to check the box of, yes, we're doing stuff with AI. At the end of the day, I don't really care. I don't notice. Like, of all the Synology suite that I deploy, I almost never really have deployed a full Synology Office suite. It's just got a couple little sticking places there that make it a little tough to really tell a business, yeah, you can replace out your Google Drive with this, because that, like, I just honestly don't have a business case for it.
How about you, Luca? I mean, yourself, the AI integration, because again, Will makes a very valid point there. Let's face it, it could be perceived to be a fad thing. I mean, again, I'll talk about my enthusiasm for it, not so much about the product, but the deployment. But how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not overly excited about this whole AI. All right, I definitely agree with what Will said. Well said. Check box. Yeah, they just have to check that box. We can do AI. I mean, from what we've seen, nothing major. I mean, Copilot has it. You can basically do presentations. You can do alterations to text. I mean, okay, who cares? But as a part-time creator, although you guys create way much content more than me, I'm kind of going for originality, and AI has that stigma also. That everything can be. You don't have to draw, you don't have to make your cover, you don't have to write anything, and so I definitely use it as a tool. I mean, Frank is a in big enterprise, and sometimes when you have an issue, I can just throw a PowerShell error to ChatGPT to just get a quick response without Googling. That's basically my level of day-to-day usage of these LLMs, right? But from a creative standpoint, as a sort of creator, I'm not too keen to it. And again, what Will said, box checked. Let's move on.
Go for it, Frank. Your POV, please.
Yeah, I'm going to be brief. I think Will and Luca hit the nail on the head here. It is a checkbox. It is simply to say that you're doing it. Those two letters at this point are there. I feel like every company that comes out with something AI related is just blurring the lines of what AI is at this point. It's like, it's built into phones, it's being built into operating systems, it's being built into office suites, it's being built into products. It's just a buzzword that everybody's putting in to say that they're keeping up with the times. And I think that Synology is doing the same thing, and I don't fault them for it. It's just a matter of how much value will this bring to users. And I don't think that much, but I'm sure to a subset of users, this might be what they were waiting for. But for the bulk of users, it's just not going to be something I think that they really interface with.
I do think integration for most users is going to be negligible. As I mentioned earlier, I quite like, one, when they deployed it, they didn't fix it to any particular LLM. So if someone does want to dick around with these things, they have to supply their own API key. They have to bring in their own access point to some kind of existing AI model, which at least means you are basically saying to the user, if you want this, go for it. And if this thing compromises your system, we've got safeguards. We're going to blur some of that information there. We can limit some of the access. We're not going to give it access to too much, but it's really on you. And I quite like that deployment, because when we do see AI deployment, again, we look at Copilot, we look at the way Google Gemini is getting forced into things with a goddamn hammer. When that's being shoved in, it's being shoved in a kind of you will take this and you will use it way. This doesn't seem to be that way. So for them to deploy in this fashion seems the best way for them to do it, even if, I think the universal agreement here is that it's widely unnecessary. But moving forward to one of the last things, there's some of the and things that were unveiled with regards to surveillance. So there was more cameras. So more cameras there, and I think me and Luca in the background have been having some fun conversations about cameras. Can't wait to talk about those. Bloody hell. But the other one is the thing that I think a million people saw coming, Synology largely removing the NAS from the entire workflow there, having the cameras directly recording to Synology C2. Again, I'll hold back my own opinion on that, but let's start with Frank. Frank, opinion on direct-to-cloud cameras from Synology rolling these out?
Hate it. I don't like it. But this
good. Well, thanks for coming.
This is coming from someone who, from my surveillance setup at home, I block everything off at the firewall level. Everything's local. It stays local. I don't want it to. I understand in the enterprise space that's, for businesses, that's not always a realistic thing. So from that perspective, I understand it. But again, everything has a subset of users where they'll be totally fine with this, and then a subset of users who will probably hate it. I am bringing in my personal subjective opinion from a home usage perspective, where I don't want any of my data getting outside of my actual local network. But that doesn't mean that all businesses out there will feel the same. There are some benefits to it. Of course, there are benefits to it, not keeping anything local and having it direct to the cloud. And then you don't have to worry about any of the local infrastructure, and you're really just mounting cameras, and that's about it. But I would like I'd like to see, I just hope it doesn't continue down that path, and it becomes a pure SaaS-based solution where you have to subscribe to it, and that is the only way it works. As long as you can keep it local, if you like, I'm good with it.
How about you, Will? What's your thoughts on it?
I completely agree with Frank. It is not for me. I don't like that stuff going up the cloud. It's nice and easy when you can literally see the hard drive and pull out the hard drive that everything's being recorded to, and that's nice. You don't have to ask questions. As if we're able to talk in a sense where pretend like this product just exists and will not have any effect on future Synology products, I like it. I like it for not me. I like it for users who, I don't want a Ring camera because I don't want it going to Amazon.
Yeah.
We can there are certain the largest companies who are in this space right now are not ones that I trust at all. So there is the benefit of having a more specific company that like Synology that it's not just going to be mining your data and having ideally some better safeguards in that. So from the existence of a product outside of its effect on other products that might come out in the future, I like that as an option. Not really something I'm going to be using. I did like the idea of C2 storage for cameras back when it first came out, where you could send up just whenever there's motion, send up a few frames. I like that concept for like your main entrance, but as a pure solution that's just where it is, you end up with a case where, oh, your internet's out. Oh, now your security cameras don't work, which is always not a great place to be.
And finally, Luca, let's talk cameras.
I mean, how the hell is Synology going to make money with a video like this, right? So obviously I have to, be the bearer of
Come
better
on, toe
news
the company
here.
line, that man.
Oh my God. No. Again, subjectively, as Frank said, no. I don't want my videos going anywhere. What Will said, yes, you depend on a very stable internet connection, and you definitely have to have a SD card or whatever in those cameras when your internet fails. So obviously that's a backup solution for your videos. And I do agree, some people, they just don't want a NAS unit in their house, or they simply don't have a real estate to accommodate a NAS unit, but they just want some surveillance going on. And sure, I can definitely see a group of users, maybe not even businesses, maybe even end users, home users, that might utilize this particular service. And again, nothing surprising considering that C2 Backup also came out. And when you compare Active Backup for Business with C2 Backup, I always recommend Active Backup for Business, especially for NAS owners, right? So you don't want your endpoints being directly backed up to the cloud. Again, you have to have a very high upstream internet to maybe do a multiple 5, 6, 10 units, 10 computers backing up at the same time, maybe. So I mean, I'm fine with it, but not something I would personally use. No.
I think for me, I'm trying to, because again, much like yourselves, I'm not going to deploy that where I live. I'm not. And I probably wouldn't recommend it very early doors. It feels temporary. As a solution, it doesn't feel like a permanent deployment, having those cloud-based cameras. But the only scenario, and I remember mentioning this to someone at the event when they were sort of showing off these cameras, I sort of commented on the fact that they are now running a bunch of cameras up here that are direct to NAS with, C2 surveillance via the NAS, and a bunch of dedicated cloud cameras. And having running all of these multiple SKUs seemed really unnecessary. But the other thing that I think that one of the only ways in which they could sell this and make it genuinely appealing, I think, to someone like me, is if they could attach cloud-mounted cameras or cloud-facing cameras to take advantage of the DVA. Because to enter into the DVA systems from Synology, you have two options. You've got the DVA 1622, which can, I think, handle 2 AI tasks. And most people that get it, come on, you guys that have recommended the DVA systems, trying to explain to end users that they can either get this $550 option or this $3,000 option, and tell them there is sod all in the middle when they want just one more AI task, absolutely kills the conversation sometimes, and then it becomes a time suck explaining the reason why. Now, if they could have these surveillance cameras mounted towards DVA-based tasks, because remember, DVA tasks are not handled by the camera, the video analysis tasks are handled by the server side. It would be quite an overhead, and maybe that would be reflected in the pricing, but I think the only way this would be popular, bit strong, be appealing to anyone like us is probably going to be if you could recommend that this would provide some of those deep video analysis functionality on the cloud. But even then, we're still now talking about a target surveillance that is now intelligent and now has a database. So immediately, heads, tails, not great. But if you guys have got anything further to add on that, but carry on. I've got one more point, but carry on.
I was just that is a very, I do genuinely wonder how somebody's going to find a Synology camera and buy it. So genuinely, I mean, in these spaces, right, we all have NASs, we all run this stuff, we all know this stuff very well, and we are all going to record to a local NAS. It just makes the most amount of sense. There's very few cases. I mean, maybe you've got like a cabin or something, but 9 times out of 10 with the people who are familiar with the Synology product, which is what they're going off of, they're just going to go to a Synology NAS. Then you go to the other SKU. Are they attempting to compete directly with Ring? Like I do genuinely wonder who's going to be technically savvy enough to know about Synology as a brand and know the pros of that, but also not somebody who has a NAS or is interested in deploying a NAS in a specific location, and also have enough customers for that to be common. So that's interesting.
I've just excellent example what Will said. I mean, having a cabin. In Croatia, we have a lot of islands, obviously, and I do have a lot of colleagues and relatives and whatnot that have, summer houses or everything on the island, and internet is sketchy there. And even when they do have surveillance at those locations, they only need internet, and they do a site-to-site tunnel, and they basically record on the land, of basically on their NAS at their primary location. So cloud-based, I just don't see it happening. I mean, no.
If those users don't want it, I don't know. I mean, it's a tough sell. It's a
really
goddamn tough sell.
It really is.
But the last point, again, stepping away from enterprise, let's bring it right the way down to the home level. Last point, B Station. How long? I think B Station's now been around for half a year, something like that. Not B Drive. B Drive, we're kind of going to put on this shelf here marked, what the fuck are you? But actually, go for it, Will. Go for it.
I love B Station. So I'm actually, I absolutely
love
I'm
not anti it.
The B Drive killed me. So when I first got it sent I actually thought it was its own computer. And I spent so long trying to figure out how to turn it on and hook it up to Wi-Fi before I realized that it was just an external drive.
Nick.
So I love that B Station exists. I don't know how it's going to do, because I do think that like the great people who would be phenomenal for, I don't know if you can explain to them to get it away from like just Google or anything like that. But I love it. It is so easy. It makes setting that stuff up incredibly easy. And especially go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we did a video like a year ago when we were talking about things we change about Synology. And one of the earliest points you made was, this shit needs to be genuinely turnkey and just on. And that is that. BSM is that. My original point about this was simply going to be, do we think Synology's hopefully going to expand B Station? Because as it stands, it's a great idea, and BSM gives you the fundamentals, but sticking it on a one-base system with sod all RAID, so you've got no redundancy, it seems weird to me that it still exists as a single drive system. And of all the deployments they could have gone for, deploying a single unit that's only 4 terabytes on a single drive that's a mechanical hard drive. I think all of us, in one shape or form has had our hands on it. Performance-wise, early doors, it's a slow old thing because it's a mechanical hard drive. It is not designed for a lot of those multiple input outputs at the early doors. So my original point was simply going to be, B Station, where the hell would we like them to go with it?
I'm actually going to disagree with you.
Oh, go for it.
A one bay unit. I think as soon as you start saying RAID and all these different things, it goes from being this dumb, simple little box to something more. And the people who I think it's perfect for, they don't have 500 gigs. Like that market to me is just the people who it is stupid simple, nothing on there, really easy. I like RAID is not a backup. Really, I love the idea of them coming with the external hard drive that you can easily plug in and have a real backup to it. But I love the idea of it staying as a one bay unit, because it is not a backup. RAID is not a backup. People will think,
Nope.
oh, they're cloned, so it's good. But in reality, I would love to just have it keep nice and simple, keep it that little box, and then just nothing more to it. Because the people who it is there for are not going to notice the performance. Because quite frankly, it's totally acceptable. It's way faster than uploading to Google Photos if you've got poor Wi-Fi, if you don't have the best upload speed for internet, and it can do everything it needs to do, and not have to have all these different configurations. Where now it starts becoming more, it starts going from a thing that is beautifully simple because there's nothing to it, to being something that you're kind of stitching together the things about Synology and things about BStation into a monster.
I just
So
wish it had
funny-
more capacity, but go for it. Sorry, Frank. Yep.
No. Funny enough, to Will's point earlier, when he said that a lot of enterprise NAS devices are because, an IT guy in the server room has, a Synology NAS at home, and now it's just easy to buy one and let him configure it. I almost feel like the BStation is an entry into, a actual NAS device. And it's to say that if you get to the point where you fill up something like this, you should probably buy a Synology NAS, maybe a 2-bay, maybe a 4-bay. It's going to do everything that does, and you could do even more. So it's like it's an entryway for people to get a understanding of some of the things a Synology NAS could do at a low price point, like Will said, with when they don't have a lot of data, and if their data grows to a point where they need to upgrade, go buy a Synology NAS, assuming, like we said earlier, that Synology continues down that home user path, which I don't see any reason for them not to.
I think, I definitely agree, but I think we haven't seen the last BStation. Not saying as a official Synology partner.
Definitely. That sounds like he knows something, everyone.
No, I don't know anything, denying anything. But I think Robbie said, I wish that it has more space. I think if there's going to be a additional unit, it's going to be a 2-bay one, simply because it's probably going to have a switch on it, RAID 0, RAID 1,
mirror.
and you're going to just simply expand on it, and not in a way, I have redundancy, because as Will, excellent point, RAID is not backup, but simply to have more room and yet have the simplicity that comes with BSM, right? And then obviously, if appetite continues, what Frank said, go and buy a proper DSM NAS and take it from there. So yeah.
So
go ahead.
What I think could be absolutely awesome, and I don't know how much digging y'all did into it, but if you SSH into a BStation, it's literally just like SSHing into a Synology. All the packages have the exact same names. It's literally installing just the same packages, just with a different skin. So I would love to see a migration utility to go from a BStation to DSM, because it's the same thing. You could use Migration Assistant with a little bit of fancy tweaking, and now you can start bringing those other people up to that higher product tier that actually has the more capability, but they keep all the setup that was there from the beginning. I could see that being a really interesting start, though you'd have to figure out how to switch over the authentication methods from being the cloud authentication to on-device authentication.
And one more thing, I think, Robbie, you and I discussed it when BStation hit this year in January. Also, it would be cool to have it as a destination for hyper backup.
Exactly, both directions.
Both directions, actually. But yeah, considering it's a 1-bay unit, right? So you wanted to have it as a backup of your backup, for instance. But that would be also a nice feature that, obviously, what Will said, it's basically DSM under a different skin. So they're deliberately limiting it, but
exactly.
they definitely do it. So maybe we'll see it in other versions of BSM. Yeah.
I say it did seem bonkers when they rolled it out. I remember saying this in the review, that there wasn't an appliance into DSM that it could communicate with. Given, I mean, again, I mentioned this in that video at the time, Luca. You're the first person I knew that ripped apart the PAT file that was in there to find those individual applications and services. So I did find that really odd. But again, they are innovating in that space. By the way, they did have a whole stand for BStation and showing the integration with some of the third-party cloud photo applications and more. So they've not just put it out and ignored it. sort of in the way they have with B-Drive, but that's another conversation for another day. But apart from that, we'll wrap things up. But just before we go, so Will, nice and simple, we'll go to the remit of the video. Will, do you think Synology is getting too enterprise or not?
I don't know. It's hard to say. It's both good and bad. It's. I'm glad to see that there are going to be new features, but it's also scary because I worry about stuff falling down. And I guess what my final feeling is really I hope they continue to do what has been serving them really well. And that is, instead of kind of taking enterprise and switching your entire product here, instead build really great products in the small user space. And then once they're proven and use those as test benches, pull those up to enterprise. And if they continue doing that, it's good. But if they start just switching tiers, it's bad.
Cool. Frank, do you think Synology to enterprise? Go ahead.
You could very clearly see they are focusing. It would appear as if they are pivoting slightly towards enterprise, for sure. Now, how much that will impact home users is tough to say, because next year, if they come out with 5 new devices for home users, we'd probably be sitting here saying, no, not at all. This is great. They just released everything new. There's a lot of money in enterprise. I could see why, for shareholders, like Will said earlier, it makes sense for them to focus on the enterprise market. Do I think they're going to enterprise? Hard to say, but I think we'll have that answer in 12 to 18 months. And, the next 12 to 18 months is really going to say if they have or if they have not. And, so gut feeling, no, I don't think they've gone to enterprise. But that might not age well. So we'll see.
Don't worry, we've got it recorded. I've pressed the button and everything. And Luca, over to you. Same question.
Well, just a couple of days ago on the Sino forum, there are a couple of threads saying what's happening with new products. They're not refreshing anything. They're going enterprise only. They forgot about us and whatnot. So short answer to your question, no. I don't think they are, because if we just reflect on a couple of years, what happened already, we have UC, FS, HD units. Those are heavily high-tier devices, which are basically serving enterprises or large businesses. And basically DP and GS units and the whole APM system is just selling subscription to one of their most advertised and really, really good product, which is Active Backup. So no, I don't think they're going. They're definitely moving in that direction, but they won't forget the Soho range and small businesses. So I don't think they're ever going to go full enterprise. No.
And I think, from my point of view, closing out, I think if we look at the refresh cycles of a lot of their existing product base, I think there aren't that many products that have crossed the 2.5 year line, and therefore there could be an argument put forward that the reason there's not been a refresh of those lines is they're still very much within their lifespan. And I think, with the exception of a few rack mounts, there's actually not that many devices that have crossed the 2.5 year line. Loads of products arrived in 2020, and we've not seen many of those see a refresh. So I do think they are going to engage in this, but they seemingly have taken their foot off of that accelerator, at least for this year. Maybe towards the end we'll see more. For me, my only concern, and when we were talking earlier on about writing on the wall and stuff like Will mentioned earlier, for me, my main concern is Synology is not a huge company. They're not. They're a big company in this space, but they're not Goliath. They really aren't. And my concern is how much of these large enterprise endeavors are going to have committed manpower, committed hours, committed resources, financial and otherwise, that will then impact into the future generations of a DS or an RS series device for them to refine the portfolio to, eke out a profit margin. That, for me, if the next cycle of the release of DS and RS systems is thin pickings, and we look at their / product page and we suddenly see certain devices of the older generation disappear, but with no replacement item, then I'm concerned. At the moment, I'm not that concerned, because I think it is a changing of the seasons thing, like Frank mentioned earlier. But I don't think they're getting to enterprise yet. But the minute they start pulling solutions without a refresh, if you come back to their product portfolio in Feb 2025, something like that, then I'd be concerned. But if you got anything further to add, do you think? I think we're good.
I could rant all day.
Good. Oh, absolutely. I could do this all day. Cool, but there you go. That is what we think. Maybe you guys agree, maybe you disagree. You've got the comments below to tell us we're wrong. Dislikes, unsubscribe. Let us know. But apart from that, thank you so much for joining me today, chaps. Have yourself a lovely afternoon, evening. And again, the links to their channels and their platforms below, recommend you check them out. But apart from that, I can hear that bird song in the background still. It's better than seagulls. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And we'll see you next time.